Before we leave the scene of F1, we've got one more. I mean, I don't know, it's like a never-ending line of F1 cars. But we've got to me, looks like a little rocket ship. I want to get in it, and if I wasn't as big as I am, I still think I'd squeeze in it and drive it. And I'm still debating on whether I want to do that or not. But you've got a little Mazda Formula Car here. Tell us about that.
It's an interesting series. They had a series called Formula Mazda.
And that's a rotary engine car too, correct?
Yeah, it's a little Mazda rotary engine car. It's full wings, downforce car. It is a surprising vehicle because they had their series, the Mazda series races with open wheel. So if you've never driven an open wheel car, one of the things you have to think about is downforce is a unique thing. It's a different experience than a GT car completely. But for most people, if you're doing F3000 or Formula One or any of these type of, like the March Ram or all the way up to the very modern Formula One cars, you're going rocket wicked fast and you got to know what you're doing. But if you want to learn how to drive an open wheel car, the Formula Mazda is by far not only the easiest to learn how to drive in, but it is the most fun. And the cost of operating this car is nothing like any other Formula car. And it's so inexpensive. And the beauty of this little car is it's like a bat out of hell, but if you can drive a GT car quick, this will teach you how to do an open wheel car with light downforce. It's just an amazing vehicle. And this car has a unique history too. I purchased the car specifically for track days so I could practice my driving when I didn't have access to my Formula One cars, because sometimes they're out getting service. So I would just take this out and it would just be for me to fix my skills, get back out of it. And then one day I took this car and I invited all of my chief mechanics from Ferrari, which were Michael Schumacher's mechanics, same guys, the ones who ran my Ferrari Formula One car, flew them over to the United States. I rented a track, invited some of my other famous driver friends and everybody, and we put about 5 of my cars on the track. And the one that the mechanics who know and work all of the most famous drivers' cars in the world, these mechanics work with Kimi Räikkönen, Michael Schumacher, all the way back to Ayrton Senna, all of these guys, the same guys. They came over, they had access to multiple of my cars. The car they wouldn't get out of all day was this car. They must have raced that car for the 3 days we were together. There were 2 track days. I don't think that car slowed down long enough for someone to unbuckle before they got back in that car. And one of the drivers in it was also not only Marc Gené, but his brother Jordi Gené, who's also a Formula driver. And I used to own his Formula 3000, which I gave back to him as a gift because it was car he won Silverstone in. But they all got in this Formula Mazda, and every one of them couldn't get out of the car. You're like, come on, it's the next guy's turn. It is the most fun that even a professional F1 driver like Mark or a mechanic who understands everything about Formula One cars got in this car. And like, I literally had to get a crowbar sometimes. Get your butt out of the car and let the next guy drive. And that's what this car is. It's not an outrageously expensive car to own, to buy, or to operate, but you'll get more fun than any street car you could possibly drive on a racetrack.
It sounds like a Ford, one I had that was a Ford lightweight. You go take it to the track and everybody's in there with their high dollar bills, and this is a Ford factory car that's eating their lunch, and it's a factory car that they come over and they get in it. You can't get them out of it. It was so much fun to take it to the track. Sounds like this is another one that you can go learn about aerodynamics, take it to the track economically, and not be embarrassed because you've got something that's really cool that the other drivers respect. Sounds like one heck of a car. So I hope everybody gets an opportunity to bid on this one as well.
And it does have spare stuff too, though. Very important. I got a couple of extra wings. I think a front wing, rear wing, and some other spares with the car, which we'll shoot those pictures for you. And on the next truck, we're going to get you all those spares.
That's right. Now, let me ask you this. We got one more, because every time I look at my list, it's one more. But this isn't a car. This is a dadgum motorhome. I mean, if you want a condo and you want to be on the track, why not have Ferrari Schumacher's Ford motorhome, motor coach office slash whatever you want to call it, office and VIP lounge bus? You've got that too.
Yeah, so this is a very interesting story and a very interesting vehicle. So if you go back in history, one of the things that's really important to understand about this is, you know, having been a big Ferrari fan and then being a Ferrari driver, you know, I had the privilege of getting to know Michael Schumacher, getting his, you know, hey, here's how, you know, when I bought my car, he's the one who's like, okay, here's how you're going to race it. This is the stuff you got to know how to do. And every time we race together, he'd be like, don't do that. Don't do that. Do this now next time. Matter of fact, it was always fun to get his feedback and input when I was doing the driving. Well, as I started to go to more and more events, you know, with my Ferrari Formula One, I really wanted to have something different than everybody else. You know, some people would show up, you got all the garages, but they had nothing there. Well, I'm a little more dramatic than that. So a buddy of mine and I, we brought our own floors and laid them out, kind of like I have here in the museum. We started bringing all of our own cabinetry. We started looking like our own F1 team. But eventually I said, when we go to some of these tracks, I want hospitality. Well, I don't want to throw up a small tent out back or just a, you know, an easy up. So in talking to Ferrari, they were getting ready to switch from their team motorhome, which was this particular motorhome we're talking about. They were switching to their new one that went from a 2-story with this side tent to that now one they use, which was 3 stories high and takes 100 people to put together. This one was the motorhome that for all the years Michael drove for Ferrari, this was the motorhome he used. And it was for him. It housed also Rubens Barrichello. It had Kimi Räikkönen, I think was Felipe Massa. They all shared this motorhome with Michael because there's 2 bedrooms in it. Bedroom slash massage room slash has the massage table, shower, bathroom, all that. And then on the upstairs down the hallway, Jean Todt, the head of Ferrari, his office was there, which I used as my office at the track, which is pretty cool. So you've got, he's been head of the FIA for the last several years since he left Ferrari. So this was the actual team motorhome. Down on the first floor, there was telemetry and all that. You know, now they got several other vehicles for that. But at the time, there was the driver telemetry area, his shower, his massage room, and then that tent that comes with it, that it has a whole outside area that you'll see in the photos. That's where, you know, when everybody else would go everywhere else, this is where the drivers and Jean Todt and those guys would eat lunch with the famous people who would come to have lunch with them. That's where they would relax. This was their private motorhome at every race event in the world. It was their personal hospitality area for, and ironic, there's a picture up here on the wall, long before I bought this motorhome, where I was sitting having lunch with Michael Schumacher, and I'm having lunch with this other driver who I didn't know he was a driver, and Michael and him are talking, and I felt so stupid because Michael goes, Tony, I got to go qualify. I'm sitting in this motorhome, which I now own. And I continued the conversation with the guy, and I said to him, oh my God, did I sound dumb? So what's your relationship? Have you raced? And he goes, yeah, I used to be a driver. And I said, oh, great. And he says, yeah, I'm Jackie X. And I went, oh. Because he looks so young. I didn't realize he looks that good. And it was Jackie X. So I got this beautiful photograph of him with me in his motorhome. And I felt like such an idiot that day. So I had to buy a motorhome just so I could feel better about myself. No. So I had the motorhome for years. That motorhome's been to Nürburgring. It's been to, I think, Barcelona. It's been to multiple tracks. And I used it when I was racing. It comes with its own truck to pull it and almost an entire semi-trailer full of road cases that have all the accessories. You know, it's got these catering kitchen and the whole raised floors. And if you look at the photographs, it's absolutely a beautiful motorhome.
It does have a tow vehicle with it? It does have a tow vehicle.
Yeah, it has the, what do you call it, semi-truck that tows it. I believe it's in there already in the stuff, but it's an Iveco.
So now we've been through all the Ferrari German stuff and everything else. The Lola, let's talk about the Lola. Even though we've already sold the Lola, I'm gonna go through some, it's advertised, so I'm just gonna go through the motions. So we need to talk about the Lola.
Okay, so when you look at this car and you want to drive, you know, an F3000, or you want to think you're driving a Formula One car, this car is as fast as a Formula One, although it was an F3000. This car I raced extensively at track events in Germany. I think Germany, Italy, Spain. I have to double check what other tracks I drove it at, but I found the car because one of my other F1 Cliente Ferrari friends who was driving it, Walter Rossing, phenomenal high-speed driver, really, really good in Ferrari F1. He used this as his car for improving his skills. And it was a less expensive to run, because when you run a Ferrari F1 car, the cost of operating that car is astronomical. So you don't take it out every weekend to practice. But if you want to get better, you got to go out every weekend and practice. And so Walter, for several years, raced this car at every major track in Europe, and making his skills so good that when he would get in his F1 car, almost nobody could touch him. And so it was also the car that we did use as the second test mule for the Ferrari aerodynamic experiments, but the car was liveried like a Ferrari. So you see the shell and the other stuff, and it even at the, when I got it, although I took it off the nose because it wasn't there, but we had a little Ferrari on there, because even though it had a BMW high performance engine and was wicked quick, it was at every track, everybody swore it was a Ferrari F1 car. So it's again a more manageably easier car to drive financially than it would be if it were a Formula One car. But the provenance in history in this, Mark Genet also took this car out once with me, really put his, when he got in it, it scared me how fast he went.
I will tell you that it's probably going to scare anybody that gets in it unless they're a Formula One driver. So I suggest they take a few training courses if they buy this one before they take off in it.
Not a problem. Whoever buys the two-seater, let me know, because I'll give them a training course in that one so they can drive the other one.
All right, so now we're going to move into these last few Ferraris. Now these aren't, you've been mentioning Ferrari because you were in Ferrari stables and you've been around Ferrari all your life. And we're going to talk about an amazing Ferrari here just in a minute, but we're going to talk about a few more Ferraris that you have in this collection that we're offering. And the first one is the 75 308 GT4. You know, that's, you know, GT4, that, you know, that was kind of a really cool car back in the day. But this and here's a full-blown race car too. I mean, if I remember right, didn't you tell me that this car, no, that was the Dino. Let's see. One of them that you trained, or Mick Fleetwood trained in, was it this car?
Oh no, that's this car.
Yeah, that's this car right here, the little Dino 308G. That's what I thought you told me. Because again, we're leaving Ferrari, we're leaving Lola, we're leaving F1, but we ain't out of race cars yet. We got Mick Fleetwood racing around in one of these cars. Tell us about that.
That's this car. So yeah, so this 308 GT4, first of all, the 308 engine was like the most massively produced Ferrari engine of all time. And in 1975, they built this one, which was before the 308 GTS existed, the Magnum PI car. They evolved from the Ferrari Dino to the Ferrari 308 Dino. So it was the first V8 mid-engine and the only V8 Dino made. And when they came out, it was a completely departure from them. You went from the flowing, beautiful lines of a Ferrari Dino to the Bertone, you know, 70s looks of sharp-nosed, angled cars. It was a complete departure for Ferrari.
Yeah, Pina Farina got upset because Bertone got the opportunity to make that car.
Yeah, actually he did, because Pininfarina had designed the Dino, and he wasn't too happy when he didn't get to design this one. And so this one went to Bertone, and it was part of that era where on the other side I'm looking at my M1, my DeLorean, my Bricklin, my Maserati, and my Dino, and I'm looking at the changes to the wedges of the 70s, you know, and this was an epitome of that. But what was amazing about the car is it was so well balanced, very incredible to drive. And in period, they did what they called an LM or Le Mans version. Well, you can't get those cars. So what I did is I had this car built to the LM spec, dry sump, the racing wheels, putting it together so I could use it for track and racing. Now, what was unique about it was I was planning this day. It was the same day I took that Formula Mazda up and they couldn't get all these guys out of the car. And it was my birthday. And so I rented the track, and that was the one where, again, this car, I set it up so Mark Janae, another well-known driver, Nathan Kinch from England, he was GT champion. I invited these guys with myself and 50 of my friends to go to a track for my birthday. And we spent the weekend up there at Buttonwillow.
Make sure you put me on that invite list next time.
Yeah, well, you'll be on the invite. Don't worry. So, and you know what? Anybody who buys one of these race cars, they'll get an invite too. I throw a good party. So we're up at this racetrack, and I'm looking at this, and I wanted them to drive other people. So I spec'd it out. You got the insides. I saved the insides. They come with the car, but you take out all the weight, and it's now a proper LM race car. And I had it all done by Carbu Engineering down here. It's very famous for doing these 308 GTs. But the problem I had is I knew Mick was coming to my birthday, and Mick's not a short guy. He's like this.
6'3".
Yeah. I had to build him a custom stage up there for when he comes over to the museum to play the drums, because otherwise his head would hit the ceiling. So, so I thought, well, what the hell am I going to do? So we actually took the seating system and re-welded it and made it so somebody his height could drive and sit down low enough. And it was still funny because even though we did all that modification so someone of any size could drive the car, Mick gets in, he's got his helmet on, and he can barely sit up straight and see out the window. And he's a big Ferrari guy. He used to drive one of these. Matter of fact, he drove this very car, this 275 GTB. When Mick was at one of my birthday parties, he goes, "Tony, I love my GTB years ago. I haven't driven one in 20 years." I'm like, "Okay, let's go." And we left everybody at the party. Mick got in the car, and he starts racing around here, driving me around. And it was a fun night. But Mick spent that whole weekend up there learning how to race a car with all these professional drivers. And the only race car of all my cars he could drive was this 308 GT4, because it was modified to be able for someone his height to drive it. I'll send you some. I know I have pictures of him driving the car, and Mark Janae and those guys as well.
I just thought the Mick Fleetwood, I think that's really cool. Mick Fleetwood being a part of it, and the fact that it was a Dino in the transition era makes it a really special car. And the fact that you took and did the time and effort to make it a track car and bring out more performance in that car is something special. And I wanted you to tell the story about that as well. So moving on from Ferraris, we're going to go into another Ferrari. Now this is something that I'm surprised you didn't do the same thing to as the one we just spoke of, but your little 82 Mondale 8. They made 6,000 or 8,000 of these things. It was just a fun little shaped car. It was kind of like you said, the Magnum PI area prior deal kind of look. And so how come that missed your chopping block and stayed a civilian car?
That's a funny way to put it.
Well, isn't that the way it happened?
No, actually, it was kind of funny. I always loved the Mondials, and I had both the convertible and the coupe. And what I found is, as much as I thought the convertible was the most beautiful one, for some strange reason, the coupe actually, I can't put my finger on it, but it drives better, and it handled better. And I was like, it was just a great little car. So I said, when I bought the car, it was like, I think it was like the first blue car I bought. And I liked it in that color. And I was like, it looks really nice, but the interior was not in great shape. So I sent it out and I had the interior completely replaced, all done in new blue leather. I had them embroider the little horses on that thing. And I went, this is a great car. And I started driving it on a day-to-day basis. And the only thing that I didn't like about it was the wheels. The original wheels on the car, I thought, well, that's probably why people think it's an understated car. So I took a set of 360 rims and I put them on the car, and all of a sudden, man, everybody thought it was the most beautiful car ever. It popped. And I never even thought of wanting to make it a race car, because I just love driving it on the street. And I know we went through all these race cars, but if you look around this room, I don't have as many race cars as I have street cars. And there's just something magical about Ferrari street cars. And, you know, you walk up to that car. Okay, we know that Mondials are not the most valuable Ferraris out there. But if you take that car and you put it next to a Porsche GT3 RS, 100,
Yes.
200, $300,000 car in a parking lot, nobody's going to look at the Porsche. They walk over and they ooh and ah all over the Ferrari. And it's such a unique Ferrari that no one knows what it is. They go, I know it's a Ferrari. And even though they made a lot of them, people are just, they love this car. And it's such a reliable car.
The fact that you took and put your little spin on it with the wheels makes it really pop, like you said. And you're exactly right. It is something that people gravitate to. It is a really neat, unique car. And to come out of your stable and to have your special touch with the wheels to it, just put it over the top, and I like it. And so I think a lot of people's going to like that as well too.
Yeah, no,
Let's
and
talk.
I hope they appreciate the subtlety of the quality of that interior I put in there. Because believe it or not, if I remember correctly, I spent more putting that interior in the car than I paid for the car originally.
For the car.
So,
All right, so let's talk about, the next one we got. You kind of told me a little bit about this one. I kind of like this car, and I think I like it because, again, it's almost this little subtle touch that you put in, but it's your 97 Ferrari 456 GTA with a cup holder.
so let's start off with, it's not mine, it's my wife's. Let's go with that because that's what it was. I had a good friend of mine many years ago, a businessman who I helped him get his business started. He became very successful, and he was driving one of these cars. It was a beautiful blue. It was called Swatter's Blue. And I fell in love with the car. And it was a 4-seater, and it was an automatic. And I'm like, my wife would love this. She could drive a Ferrari finally without having to mess with the stick, without playing with the clutch, even though she knows how. I thought this would be the perfect car for her. And so I cut a deal. I bought the car for my friend and gave it to my wife, and she drove it for about a month. Now this car goes almost 200 miles an hour as a 4-seater, and she put two of our little kids, our twins, would sit in the back, and and she'd drive them around in that, and she loved the car, but then she stopped driving it, and I'm like, I see her going back to the minivan. I'm like, honey, I thought you liked the Ferrari. She goes, doesn't have a cup holder. I went, you're kidding me. She's like, no, doesn't have a cup holder. I'm like, so you're not driving it because it doesn't have a cup holder. I said, all right. So I went to my machinist. We bought this high-grade aluminum block, and we built this 100 point solid piece billet aluminum cup holder, and we removed the ashtray. We even put the charger for the cigarette lighter charger in there for her phone, and I mounted this in that blue car. And so, long story short, she had the car for a while. She started driving it again, and I had an opportunity to buy a newer one. And so when I had sold the blue car, because basically I was going to get her something else, and she's like, where'd you do my Ferrari? I said, I was buying you a newer one, honey. And so I bought her another one, which was this car, and I gave it to her. And I'm like, oh, damn, I'm gonna have to make a new cup holder. So I was getting ready to try to design and build her a new fancier cup holder. And I get this call about a month or so after I had sold the blue car. This guy calls me up. He says, are you Dr. Nobles? And I said, yeah. And he goes, did you used to own this blue car I bought from this dealer? And I said, oh yeah, I did. And he goes, some idiot took out the ashtray and put a cup holder in. Do you happen to know what happened to that ashtray? I said, well, yeah, because I'm the idiot. And I said, but I'll tell you what, I have that thing. He was up in the San Fernando Valley. I said, you hold on to that cup holder. I'll be right there. I drove all the way up there. I brought him the ashtray. He gave me the cup holder. He didn't realize this thing was like, at the end was almost a $10,000 ashtray at the time to have it machined and made and what we went through for it. And he got his ashtray, and my wife still had that cup holder. It is the best feature in that car, bar none.
Well, and let's don't forget, it's a rare car. It's one of only 403 built, and it's a V12 car. So for your wife to have a V12, one of 403 built car, and she's zipping around at 200 mile an hour with a cup holder, that's almost, if I seen her putting her lipstick on, I'd have to get off the freeway because that'd be a handful.
Well, and I will tell you this, every time my wife sits in the passenger seat of one of my Ferraris, when I'm driving, no matter how well I'm driving fast or not, she'll do this a lot of times. She'll look over to the side when she sees me getting close to somebody. But then I'll get a call saying from a buddy of mine, hey, I just saw you whipping down the street in your Ferrari. I said, which one? It's the silver one. I go, that's Rhonda. Goes, holy cow, she was like driving like a bat out of hell. It's like, so then one day I'm driving, I see my wife going by, and sure enough, boom, like this. I'm like, honey, you give me crap when I drive fast. Look at how you're driving. And she goes, oh, I wasn't driving that fast. You don't realize how quick you're going in that car. But it is, if you want a car for anybody to drive that can go super fast, V12, easy to drive, it's an automatic, you don't have to shift gears, but you hit that gas, it'll throw your head back. It's a wonderful car.
I actually like it. I like it a lot better than the car that we're fixing to talk about, and it's a cool car. It's just totally a different car to me. Is your 2002 Ferrari Spider 360 with 27,000 miles. You know, to me, I tell everybody when they look at the car that we were just talking about, the 456 GTA, that's kind of the man's car, and then the 360 is kind of the go out date, wife driving car. You know, it's more of the big city show off car. The GTA is a race car to me. It's a man's car.
I'll tell you this about the 360 Spider. So first of all, I did buy it for my wife. That was what replaced the 456 for her. And it has the paddle shifter, so that way she didn't have to shift. But I found after she tried to drive it once or twice, she goes, I didn't want you to buy it so I could drive it. She said, I just like looking at the engine through the glass, and I just think it's a pretty car. So she always rode in it and didn't drive it. And the difference between this is a lot of people would think that, but I will tell you, as a street car, this was the car that all the guys wanted. When this car came out, it was the evolution of the 308 to the 328 to the 348 to the 355, and then came the 360. Major departure because it was the first car that had decent paddle shifters. It was designed, you know, by Ferrari to be the next, pardon the expression, guy's car, you know, convertible California. And to me, having it in this beautiful titanium color with the Bordeaux seats, I actually got a lot of, you know, I think it was the more studly car. The 456 is a beefy car. It is truly what you would think of as a guy's car, but easier for a woman to drive. Whereas the 360 is elegant like a Ferrari Dino, but was a bat out of hell. As a matter of fact, when I was racing in Formula One with those paddle shifters, and you could hear the engine go, bam, 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 bam. This 360, if you use those paddles, it makes the same music, and it sounds incredible. When you take it up to 7,000 RPMs and shift gears, you'll be like, oh my God, what a car. And it's one of the cars that I really hesitated letting go in this for what I'm doing to the stuff I'm keeping in my collection, because it was just a lovely car to go, you know what, I want something easy, fun, but when I pull up, they're going to park it right in the front in the restaurant. It's always going to get oohs and ahs, and it's still a timeless, gorgeous Ferrari. I love that car.
Now you did upgrade it too with the F1 sequential transmission and F430 transmission pump too, didn't you?
Yeah, so one of the flaws of the 360 was the F1 transmission. If you didn't do the upgrades to where you bolted it on and then you didn't put in the F430 pump, you'd be driving and the thing would start to miss and lose gears and it wouldn't work. And I replaced it twice. And then finally the dealer said, look, you want to make sure this car never has a problem again, upgrade it to the 430 pump, put that in there and it'll be flawless. You know, and it really is. It's just it's an incredible car to drive.
Well, it really most certainly represents well, and makes somebody a wonderful driver. As you said, I drove it a little bit the other day, and it just has that beautiful Ferrari music. It's just something that if you've never heard it, you appreciate it and go, wow, watch that. And if you've heard it, you can just kind of settle in and enjoy it with your ride. I like the car a lot. So
I think anybody who buys that car should know you're not buying what we call Ferrari resale red. I mean, it's when you see that titanium in Bordeaux, it's a connoisseur's car, you know.
It sure is. I like the car, and I'm glad it's not red too. now I just, we got to go to the Porsche just because we're still in high-end cars. But you got a little Porsche 928. That's kind of a cool little car. But wow, we jump out of F1s and Ferraris to a Porsche 928. I can see that it's white and you like white. I know you absolutely love white. But tell me the story about the 928.
Okay, so the reason I bought this car was because I'm very nostalgic. Every car I bought has a story behind it. And when I married my wife, who is like the most important thing in my world, you know that, I've told you that many times. I adore that woman. And I wanted to buy her a sports car. And a friend of mine who I did early on years ago, did some work for, and then we became able, he like the kind of guy who would call me in the middle of the night, hey, I need some help on this thing. I can't get my TV remote working. Help me. This kind of stuff when I was really, really young. And he was a famous movie producer in Beverly Hills called Glenn Larson. And, he was the guy who actually did Magnum PI and Battlestar Galactica, all those TV shows. I used to go out and put design stuff in his house for him and things when I was a young kid. Anyway, long story short, he had this beautiful 928. And the movie, what was that one? Risky Business had come out. And I saw this movie and it was just like, I couldn't believe it. That was the same car, same color kind of thing that I had. It was the gold car. But anyway, I bought this car for my wife as her first real, and I bought it from Glenn. And it was the first thing. She just loved this Porsche. And she drove it for years and years and years. And then I sold it. And I kept regretting it because it was a wonderful driving car. And I kept looking and I wanted one in my collection, mainly because it reminded me of my wife in a sports car. And I was looking for a white one. Do you know how hard it is to find a white 928? Pretty hard. So I waited for several years to buy it, finally bought that one. And it became part of my collection. Actually, it lived most of its life in my airplane hangar. So, but it was all because of the sort of Risky Business and seeing my wife in this sexy little Porsche. That's why I had to have the car. But now I bought her some newer cars, so she didn't have a problem.
Letting it go. Well, I got to ask you about one because I think I kind of overstepped it here before I got off into the 928 and the little cheaper stuff, but we'll get out first. But holy cow. Tell me more about our 1980 BMW M1. Inca orange, of all the colors, I love Inca orange. From a guy who likes white, you've got Inca orange. It is a 13,000 mile car. I gotta tell you, I've looked this thing over, I've drooled over it, I've driven it, I've moved it around, I've massaged it, I've rubbed it, I went back and done all that 2 or 3 times, and this car is impeccable. It is well presented in every way, and I can find very little, if any, flaws in this.
Yeah, the car is, it's an amazing car. And since my childhood, I've always been a fan of the M1. It was one of those dream cars you had to have. And and again, you laugh because it's Inca orange and not white. Well, if I turn my computer right over here, you'll see my white M1 sitting right there. And the thing is that I always was in love with the white one. And I had an opportunity years ago to buy what they call one of the pro cars, because they build very few of these cars at all. Matter of fact, there were 398 or 99 street cars.
And there were, I don't think they built, but 70 of them in Inca orange too. So yeah.
Right, and they were very rare. And it was the car that everybody saw presented with the car. And so what happened is I had the chance to buy the car, and it had come up that I wanted to have one street and one pro car. And that was the purpose I bought the car. The car was a 3-owner car from new with all the history back to the very first day when this car was delivered in Munich. To when it came over and spent 30 years with a physician here in the United States. And then it was acquired after that by a broker. So it wasn't titled again after those. And then I bought it from the broker, and I never actually titled the car to me because I was trying to decide if I would be willing to paint it white, because I know you love that orange. But to me, I wanted a white one, but I had a white pro car. And probably the only reason I'm even letting this car go out of my collection was everybody would hate me forever if I took that beautiful orange car and painted it white. So I kind of decided that that was the thing. But the car, I'll tell you, it drives like a brand new car. And if no one's ever driven an M1, you have to understand that when you run through the gears of an M1, this car has a torque curve that is consistently like a straight line up a hill. As fast as you can jump on the gas and as fast as you can shift those gears. And other cars, you'd be like, and this car, you shift to the gears, the car, you're just sitting there going faster and faster and faster and faster and faster. You know, it just doesn't pull. It's the gear ratio and the power to gear ratio in that car is fast, quick. And you want a car that everybody on the planet is going to look at and go, yo, you can pull up in the latest, brand newest Ferrari. You pull up in an M1, especially that orange one, and people will go crazy. And you probably don't know this, but the story as to why when you look at the back of that car, there are two BMW logos on the back. Did you notice that?
Yes, sir, I did.
Okay, so most people don't know this, but the M1 was designed by Lamborghini in
That's what I was
partnership.
going to say. Yeah.
Yeah, in partnership with BMW. So the engine, the running gear is all BMW, but it was an Italian design engineer who designed the car, and it was being built at the Lamborghini factory. And for those who know the story, Lamborghini went through a bankruptcy, and at the time they were building the M1s, and M1 had to break into, BMW had to break into the Lamborghini factory, steal the cars back. Otherwise, they were going to be sold off for junk. And it's an incredible car with an epoxy body, you know, but it is BMW's first and only supercar.
Yes.
That production supercar. And so, you know, if I look behind my computer over here and I look at, I have many supercars from all the different manufacturers, and still sits my BMW M1 Pro car, which used to sit next to that beautiful orange car that I can't paint white. So that's the story.
Well, you've got another one here, and we're just about to the end. I think we got 3 or 4 more cars, but we're trying to save a few unique cars, and then we got one special car to talk about. But here's one to me that every time I walk by it, I almost want to, you know, you see a puppy, you want to pick it up, put it in your pocket, and take it home. And the more I look at this car, and the more of it being right-hand drive, and the more of it being from New Zealand, the more that it's in blue, and the more that it has a racing stripe on it, and the more that I find out there wasn't but 4 or 6 of these things built, and it's called a Puma. Okay, well, there's 2 built, and it's a Puma that looks like a little Shelby Cobra. But I hate to call a race car cute, but this damn thing's cute. Tell me about that car.